Ayurveda is such a complex yet simple science. Ayurveda is actually one of the world's oldest holistic and integrative health systems. It's a science that combines the knowledge of science, the laws of nature, the human body, psychology, spirituality, and philosophy. So it really is a holism, a journey of balance to bring the mind, body, spirit back into more of a balanced state. But to me, Ayurveda is really about cultivating a deeper understanding about yourself, because when you learn the Vedic way, when you learn about Ayurveda and applying it to your life, because it's an embodied practice, you really start to understand yourself and how you function and how you work and how you can bring out the best in you and step into your higher self. I'm all about bridging the gap between Western and Eastern medicine. I feel that if more people align themselves with like Ayurveda and their natural health sciences, then it would be a more peaceful, beautiful, blissful world. Your body will have the answers.
The following podcast is for educational purposes only and contains material that may not be suited for sensitive audience members. Audience discretion is advised. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Health King's Court, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Health. I'm your host, Zach the Health King. Today I have a very lovely guest with me. She's a registered nurse, an Ayurveda practitioner, a women's health practitioner, and currently she's studying for her master's in acupuncture. With her company, Harmony Inspired Health, she helps people unlock the secrets to optimal health, hormonal bliss, and business success through combining evidence-based medicine and Ayurveda. She's also a podcaster herself, with over 140 episodes on her show, Harmony Inspired Health. If you haven't picked up on her name yet, she is Harmony Robinson-Stagg. Welcome to the show, Harmony.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm super, super happy to have you here. It's a very interesting topic that we're here to talk about. Ayurveda, at least to begin with. It's something that anyone that's explored the holistic health world and online realm at all, it's probably come across. It's a very catchy or even trendy term, but I don't think a lot of people really comprehend what it even is, right? I think it's a word that perhaps gets slapped around everything and kind of conflated with natural health and herbs and whatever. But can we start off by getting a definition of Ayurveda? Not necessarily textbook maybe, but what it means to you or whatever that makes you think of. What is Ayurveda?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wholeheartedly agree. I think people hear the word Ayurveda and they associate it with either an Ayurvedic diet or they've done a dosha quiz online. And it's a very sort of limited understanding of what Ayurveda is. But Ayurveda is actually one of the world's oldest holistic and integrative health systems. It's a science that combines the knowledge of science, the laws of nature, the human body, psychology, spirituality, and philosophy. So it really is a holism, a journey of balance to bring the mind, body, spirit back into more of a balanced state. But to me, Ayurveda is really about cultivating a deeper understanding about yourself, because when you learn the Vedic way, when you learn about Ayurveda and applying it to your life, because it's an embodied practice, you really start to understand yourself and how you function and how you work and how you can bring out the best in you and step into your higher self. So it offers tools and principles of knowledge for good health, but you're the one that gets to determine when, what, and how you apply these in order to create the perfect balance for you.
Interesting. And so it's overall a school of living, really. It's not even a school of medicine or health or wellness. It seems like it's just an overall conscious existence kind of practice. And so where did it come from? Because nowadays with the internet, everything is everywhere, right? There's Ayurvedic individuals in America, in Australia, and probably everywhere in between. But is there any one particular geographic location or culture that kind of stemmed this school of?
Yeah, so I will just go back on what you said. Like Ayurveda is like the art of living, and that's pretty much exactly what the word means. So the word Ayurveda, Aya means life, and the Veda is the science of or the knowledge of. So it's often translated to the science and knowledge of life and longevity. So you're spot on there. And yeah, Ayurveda stems from India. So it's the ancient health science from India. It's also the sister science of yoga. So Ayurveda really looks at that health path of like the physical, mental, spiritual, all of the things that encompass who we are as a holism. And yoga was sort of more seen as like that pathway to enlightenment through spirituality and asana practice. But they use together. There's actually the three sciences. So there's the Jyotish astrology is one, the Ayurveda health science, and then the yoga, the science of yoga. And the three of them bring you into moksha liberation.
There are a lot of vocab words getting thrown out here. I want to slow it down and make sure that we're understanding. Okay, so there's Ayurveda itself, which has kind of subsections, right? Am I getting that
Mhm.
right? And so
Yeah.
those three subsections are astrology, health science, and yoga, or those are, am I following that? What
So
are the,
there's Ayurveda in itself is like the health science,
okay,
and it is one of the three main Vedic sciences. So the other two are one is yoga and the other one is Jyotish astrology.
yeah.
So the so Ayurveda is one of the three sciences.
Got it. Got it. So one of the three Vedic sciences is
Yes.
Ayurveda. Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
was I also somewhat right though in that Ayurveda you mentioned has kind of the specific categories. There's the mind side, the body side, the spirit side. Do you want, can we give some names to those and understand what those kind of branches are if they're able to be quantified or described?
Yeah, 100%. So Ayurveda is such a complex yet simple science, I guess. And it really is, it does have eight branches, but those eight branches are not exactly what we're talking about. So the eight branches, I mean, surgery is one of them, gynecology is one, pediatrics, aging, toxicology. So that's looking at the health science. So there's eight parts, branches of Ayurveda when you're treating a person. But Ayurveda, when it treats a person, it treats on different levels. So it treats on the Ayurvedic psychology level, the mind level, it treats on the body, the physical body level, it treats on the spiritual level as well. So tapping into Dharma, purpose, spirituality. And it is a philosophy within itself. So it combines methods that can treat all of these aspects of self to get the best outcome for the individual. And it doesn't matter what you come in with. Like I specialize in women's health. So I have a lot of women who come into clinic who have hormonal imbalances. And so I don't just look at their pathology, their blood tests, and treat their physical symptoms. We go deep into the Ayurvedic psychology side of things, like how is this imbalance making you feel? Or did it like, have we treated like the underlying cause of stress? What sort of limiting core beliefs are in the way of healing? Those type of things, depending on the client. And then we look at that sort of deeper connection to self, which is like that spiritual aspect and also that dharmic impact aspect. So Dharma is like the right action that we're doing each day. And so a lot of women, they might come in with hormonal conditions, and then we end up going down this sort of deep dive into Dharma because they're feeling so disconnected to their purpose. They're feeling a lot of internalized stress. They're starting to secrete a lot of the cortisol stress hormones, which then will cause an imbalance in the sex hormones. And so the main thing that's really holding them back from stepping into their higher self and healing is like this disconnection from purpose. And so no matter what diet you give them, what herbs you give them, what treatments you give them, if they're still rocking up every day feeling very disconnected to this dharma, this purpose, they're not on that path, then they're not going to really be able to step into their whole self and heal on that level of holism that Ayurveda is. Did that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's such a key point. Anyone that has a proper comprehension of the body
Mm.
comprehends its innate and inseparable connection to the mind, the emotion, the spirit, and the more metaphysical side of things. The physical vessel is just that. It's the physical vessel that the metaphysical side of us, whatever nomenclature you want to put on it, is kind of navigating this world within. And
Mm.
so you establish that Ayurveda is itself an entire philosophy, a school of thinking, a way of existing. And I want
Mhm.
to explore the other side of yourself and the other side of the current world as well in kind of Western or modern medicine or whatever name we want to put on it, allopathy, what have you. Because to my understanding, you're a registered nurse, and that's within the Western medicine side of things as well, which operate within their own whole philosophy and theory of health and the way the body works and how we go about so-called treating the body. And so, how do these two appearingly very perhaps opposite schools of thoughts and philosophy come together in your head? Are you pulled in different directions? Do you find some sort of harmony between them? How do you bridge those two, or do you keep them separate? And how did you come to be someone that explored both of them?
Yeah, so great question. I absolutely bridge the two. That's my whole mission. And even on my podcast, I say like I'm all about bridging the gap between Western and Eastern medicine. And the way that the reason I wanted to do this and the reason that I sort of got into Ayurveda and these other natural health practices is I am a nurse and I have been a nurse for over 19 years now. And then when I birthed my twin boys, so they're almost 12. After the birth of my twin boys, I went into a hormonal heap. So I had newborn twin babies. I was running a business. I was studying. I was teaching as a yoga Pilates teacher and I was nursing. And I was just doing all the things and I fell into a heap. And the allopathic medical system, it couldn't really support me in the way that I fully needed the support of my body and my mind. And I knew through my like yoga practice and also having experienced sort of like Ayurvedic, like learning about Ayurvedic psychology and Ayurveda in the past, that this could be the answer to my own healing. And so I decided to go all in on Ayurveda and really put it to the test. And the transformation for me on so many different levels, not just my hormones, my physical body, but like I said, that deeper connection piece, my mental health, the stress and anxiety. Like I was suffering from crippling stress and anxiety after the birth of my sons and trying to manage all the things. Ayurveda really supported me in that. And so I wanted to dive deeper and just study Ayurveda and become really understand the science and how it works and how it can support the limitations of the Western medical system. So as a nurse, I worked mostly in the emergency department. So I would be seeing lots of um, patients just sort of like rebounding in and out of the emergency department for different things because it's often like the dumping ground as well. It's not all just emergencies coming in from trauma, car crashes. It's like a lot of this dumping ground where you got to sort of then sort them out and you would see them sort of just rebounding. And I could really see the limitations of that Western medical system. And although I'm very grateful I went through that system because I do understand the science and the physical body and like how it relates in the world we live in, Ayurveda is, as I mentioned, like this science that can really pull all of you through and change the trajectory of your life and your healing and the patterns of that you have associated with your healing. So that's how I got into it. And I started studying Ayurveda to become an advanced Ayurvedic medicine practitioner. And then I started my own health clinic. Did that answer all your questions? Is
Yeah,
that
yeah. It's interesting to explore someone that dips their feet in both ponds or even has their entire legs in both ponds, right? Because for me, it's like I see the way that things are structured in the world, and I don't really fully comprehend how there can be a mutual practice and coexistence. And it's so strange to me because it's like, I mean, I guess I get it, right? So you said the key phrase there in that the Western medicine is emergency care.
Mhm.
I feel like that's really where it is set up to thrive and exist as a whole. And that's why everything ends up kind of getting treated like an emergency. And then if you can't apply an emergency model where, hey, there's not a direct threat, you're going to die today, tomorrow. We can't tell you when you're going to die because of XYZ thing that you're telling us about. Well, then
Mhm.
we don't see anything wrong. And then that's where, of course, the more Eastern or Ayurvedic type philosophies certainly shine in that they cover, hopefully, the majority of the time and could perhaps even stop someone from ever getting to that emergency scenario in the first place. But then if they do, then the Western doctors will sew you back up. Like I guess I see how that could kind of mesh together and exist in the world. I don't know.
Mm.
I
I
have
get,
interesting thoughts. What's up?
yeah, like I hear what you're saying. Like I totally do. I guess I can give you a few little scenarios. So the thing with Ayurveda is we always meet the person with where they're at. So one situation is that we do have to accept we're in this modern world and a lot of people are not going to be open or ready to doing the work that Ayurveda and the Eastern philosophies require. So we do need a system that's going to support these people because of where we've got to in the world. But on the other hand, there are so many of my clients come to me because I have both paths and I'm very open to understanding what they're going through. And so if you think about, say, a type 1 diabetic comes to see you, so they don't make insulin, like they're born that way, they're not going to. So not type 2, where it's been all like lifestyle that's caused sort of this disease. This is type 1, born that way, they're not making insulin. It's critical that they have medical input to provide them with the insulin. It does not mean that they just should be relying on that medical system because of their disability or their dis-ease within their mind, their body, it's going to create a lot of restrictions in their life. A lot of limiting core beliefs can come up, and it doesn't mean that they can't better their life by practicing these philosophies and these science such as Ayurveda. That's going to set them on a better lifestyle and living their best life with more passion and more deeper connection, and still not be ashamed or worried that they have to take a medical intervention each day to actually keep them alive. Does that kind
Yeah,
of,
absolutely. Yeah, and I can
yeah.
certainly relate to the having to, not having to, but choosing to meet people where they're at for the sake of being able to help someone rather than them being turned off. But I have a bit of even conflicting thoughts within myself. And so I forget if we chatted about it before, but of course, I run the charity organization beatcancer.org. We help
Yeah.
people with holistic cancer healing and prevention. And so our counselor is a naturopathic doctor herself. She heals and helps people heal using holistic ways, but she'll also help people that they're not ready to go entirely holistic in their lifestyle and pathways. They'll do the chemo and the radiation and all that. For some reason, they wanted to go that route. That's cool. It's their life. And she'll help them not suffer the consequences that way. So I understand me on like an organizational level, me on a personal level, I don't know. I'm just an extreme person. I'm extreme holistic health. Let's go. I'm team all the way this way. But I get that not everyone is ready
Mm.
for that, or perhaps they'll ever in their lifetime be in that way because of all the programming of society, of course. And this is kind of what irritates me about, wanting to, all right. So the whole integrative thing now, we have the holistic side, we have the allopathic side, right? And let's talk about history. What's the history of the two? There was the holistic healing side first of all the different cultures and all the different healing practices from all over the world. Then comes along the petropharmaceuticals, and they just
Mhm.
ruined it all for everybody. And they ran their smear campaigns in the media and pushed their pills, this, that, the other. And they got all that kind of labeled as quackery and really just smashed it out, unfortunately. But you can
Mm.
only hide the truth for so long. So now the holistic side of things is coming back and resurging like a crazy tidal wave. And I feel like now the Western side of things is saying, ooh, we couldn't, oh, they're coming back. Now let's try to control the opposition by, oh, yeah, you can, yeah, you guys are doing good now. Here, come play in the establishments that we built. But then we still own the establishments. And, it's a weird thing going on. And I know you're involved in both, so you don't have to align yourself with anything that I just said, of course. But, I think there's some trickery going on to all this integrative stuff going on. Not necessarily by people like yourself that have the best of intentions, but I think at a institutional level,
Mm.
I'm very suspicious
A
when
100%. I think like the pharmaceutical, that's an enterprise on their own, but I also think it's important not to misalign what allopathic medicine is and just say it's pharmaceutical medicine, because surgery also is part of allopathic medicine and first line treatment, and that was traditional medicine. So the word cesarean section came because Caesar did the very first cesarean section, and this was like thousands and thousands of years, so that's traditional medicine. And also pharmaceutical medicine, they have modulated off herbal medicine. So herbal medicine is very, very powerful. It's just like you said, the companies have taken over and made synthetic versions of and created medicine from it. But the pharmaceutical medical, the pharmaceuticals, they are one part of, and they try to control, I agree, they definitely try to control the allopathic medicine, but that they're not the entirety of the system, if that makes, if
yeah.
you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
of course. There's certainly more going on. I guess when there's the most predominant or at least the loudest side of it is that certain organization or entity or conglomerate of entities, it's hard not to perhaps conflate it. But yeah,
Yeah.
surgery is an interesting thing. And then it gets back into the emergency scenarios versus helping
Mm.
bodies along so they don't end up in emergency scenarios. And then there's a school of thought, of course, that I don't know if it's included in Ayurveda, but I know in many traditional healing philosophies, the body is very much looked at as a closed system. And there's really very, very, very rarely a time to cut it open without having an alternative manner of healing. That might not be quick. It might not be, hey, yes, we're gonna, fix you from within as quickly as just cutting something out. But that doesn't mean necessarily there's not an alternative solution. Is that something that in Ayurveda they kind of promote, that the body is a closed system and should kind of be left alone in that way?
Yeah, like if appropriate and if that's for the best outcome for the person, then 100%, because the body has the power to heal itself. But it again, it always depends on the situation and the person and what's really going on. Like I said, surgery is one of the 8 branches of Ayurveda. And so if something is overgrown, so there's like an overgrowth of what is not supposed to be there, and it is deemed that by like scaling it back and then using herbal treatments and different body treatments to heal is going to be the best outcome for that client, then that's the way that they would lean towards going. So it's all based on best outcome and goals of the clients. And even in Ayurveda, we have like the 6 stages of disease. And so if that you're at that 6th stage, that final stage of dis-ease, they are very real about saying that it's going to be a really long, tough journey to heal that, because it's affected all of the doshas, it's affected the tissues, it's affected the blood system, the lymphatic system. So it goes right into like looking at where that disease is sitting in those 6 layers as well. And that will also dictate on the different treatments that you would provide, even if it is like more of like those treating the physical symptoms, you're still going to look at treating the Ayurvedic psychology, because chronic pain, for instance, is like something that can really cause a lot of mental strain in an individual. And so then they would be looking at not just treating the physical, but also the mental health of that person, which obviously isn't going to have anything to do with surgery, but it might be giving them some herbs, giving them like Abhyanga massage treatment each day, Shirodhara, depending on which dosha is imbalanced.
Yeah.
So now, like typically, like Ayurveda today in India, you can do a BAMS, which is a degree in like medicine and Ayurvedic medicine. But unless you're BAMS, like you're a clinical doctor, physician, as well as Ayurvedic trained, obviously you wouldn't be doing any sort of surgery. So I just want to make it clear. It's not, Ayurveda today is more so lifestyle medicine. It is not, there's no Ayurvedic surgery center like as such. It's maybe in India, but they would be treating and healing post-operatively with Ayurvedic herbs and treatments. But it's like a history of Ayurveda. It's not happening now so much. Just like leech therapy, like blood sucking therapy. Some countries still do it. We don't do it here in Australia, but some definitely still do it to release the toxins, to support to decrease the pitta dosha, the buildup of the pitta, the heat. But it's not regularly done in all countries.
Yeah. I'd certainly imagine there's some people that would get in trouble for that somehow. Yeah, someone's getting mad about that. But I'm going to throw out a very interesting Darwinistic philosophical approach to this whole thing and see what it makes you think of, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're currently at a state in society where the average person, I would say, takes zero care of their health, completely abuses their body, and then relies on the modern automation of all the things that are out there to quick fix, emergency save, what have you, cut out the problem or hack out the problem or do this, drugs, this, that, whatever, so that they can then go back to completely ignoring their health and completely ignoring their wellness. And it's like the modern Western emergency services, while at a baseline beautiful and awesome for humanity, have they allowed and created this behavior in society where people can avoid doing the work and not suffer the consequences of not doing the inner healing work? People can completely abuse themselves, their mind, their body, their emotions, and are allowed to be living still. Whereas natural consequence would have their own actions killing them. And when you remove natural consequence, how can anything but chaos stem from that? And then look at all the chaos we see today. It's like, would more people be living right, at least at a ratio level, if they had to? Because there was actual consequences rather than being, saved or so-called saved and allowed to live still. It's an interesting Darwinistic.
Allowed to live. I mean, on the surface, there's so many answers, like my mind. There's so many things I can say about that. But yeah, on the surface level, obviously, if people were held more accountable for their health, there would be less rebounding into the Western medical system, for sure, without a doubt, 100%. But there's so many layers to that. So many layers to that. I don't even know where to start. So next.
Do you want to skip that one then?
No, I'm just thinking you can go down any path here. Human rights. You can go down the path of keeping people alive for too long, so their quality of life is just not there, and that's what we do in Western medical system. But at the same time, we could also go down the path of people have had such a better life because they have been able to give birth and not bleed out through giving birth and not have their baby die because the cord's been wrapped around the neck, because there's been surgeons and people there to save both the mother and the child's life. There's just so many ways to answer that question. And that's why I'm just I like to be non-judgmental and understand where everything plays a part in the world that we're in. We all have gotten to this point in time together, and we are finding our own ways and our own truths through it. And I feel that if more people align themselves with like Ayurveda and their natural health sciences, then it would be a more peaceful, beautiful, blissful world. Everyone would have so much more abundance of health. But the reality of that's like getting to that enlightened stage, and the society we're in, I think I'm not going to be around to see that enlightened stage of society. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. So it's it's an interesting topic because it's so broad. Like we could probably do like 80 million podcasts on that one comment you made, which I love.
Yeah. Oh man, and then there's a lot of stems I want to kind of snatch onto off what you even just said. The one thing I thought I was done beating up on the allopaths, but you said one of the ones that annoys me. When pregnancy and birth is interrupted and messed with, it's one of the things that really irritates me because it's picking on people at their most vulnerable on both sides of the equation, the mother and the baby, of course. The whole cord wrapped around the neck. Anytime, I think a lot of the times that's heavily abused and used to sell cesarean sections. And it's really a strange thing that it gets kind of purported, and it kind of shows a lot of miscomprehension of the body because a baby isn't breathing through their lungs. A baby with the placenta attached is still receiving everything they need from that placenta. So it's, I think, a lot more common and natural and normal and not an emergency scenario than is purported for the whole cord wrapped around the neck. And we don't have to get into the nitty gritty. I'm sure there are variances and times where it does present a risk, but I think though that's such a hugely inflated thing, mostly the cesareans.
The cord wrapped around the neck's not just about the breathing, it cuts off blood supply to the head. So it can make it brain dead or completely dead. The other thing is I've worked obviously in the emergency department where we've had women come in labor. I've seen it firsthand and experienced it. It's also not nice to experience the loss of a child and a baby or have to resuscitate an infant. And we probably should put a trigger warning here because this is like a very triggering conversation for a lot of people. The other real life experience I have with I think a lot, and like I don't want you to get me wrong here. Like I am natural health, like that is my jam. That is what I love, right? Yeah. But I also think there's two sides of the story. And I think the natural health actually attack the allopathic a lot more almost these days. And what I've seen I'm on the Gold Coast, Australia. The other thing that I will say to that is my husband is an anaesthetist. So he's on call. He gets called in for these exact emergencies. There is no way in the world he wants to be called at 1:30 a.m. to go into hospital and then try to save a pregnant woman and her baby, and the baby dies, which they had the other day, and be like, oh, it's just a conspiracy theory that cords get wrapped around the neck, or that doesn't really happen. Like, as if he wants to have a good night's sleep. He never wants to see a mother in distress. He never wants to tell the mother her child has just died. He never wants to see a baby died. He doesn't want to deal with the trauma because he's such an empath and a nice person. And he just would rather go to sleep, wake up and go for a surf. But the reality is that does happen. And so we do need these systems in place to support women and to support people in need in that time. And the fact is that we are having more more birth rates come through because there is support. So yes, women have been birthing babies for years and years and years naturally. And if you can do it that way, it is the most perfect way to do it. But I don't think a woman should ever feel ashamed of not being able to birth their child naturally because there's some sort of complications. And we've had, before there's been support, so many women and children have died, and that's never spoken about either. So I just wanted to put it out there. I don't know how this conversation went down that road. I thought I was coming to talk more about Ayurveda and Ayurvedic psychology, but I do think there's a lot of misconception in the natural health world that like to really jam it down the allopathic system's throat when they don't actually have an understanding because they've never been in the system themselves. And I'd like to caveat that with different countries have different systems. Like the American system, I know, is very much like private, sort of, you need private health insurance. We have more of a public system and everyone gets the support that they need. And the other thing with our pharmaceuticals, it's illegal for any pharmaceutical company to promote their product. Like there's no doctors getting paid. Like I've seen the TV shows from the American side where they get all of the paid to prescribe and all that kind of stuff. That's illegal here. So I'm not sure if it's true in your country or not, but there's lots of differences countrywide as well. That's why I think it's not just it's such a political issue in each country. It's not just like a natural health versus medical system. But yes, I did not come on here as a medical person. I came on here as a natural health practitioner.
No, but it's certainly an important point that you make. And I don't have so much hubris that I can't recognize when I am out experienced in a particular topic. And so I certainly recognize that perhaps I do, in my thoughts or experiences or my own kind of readings and understandings, perhaps I am part of the people that get a little easy to throw hands at the allopaths, but it's an interesting song and dance that's happened throughout history because it's like it's just a strange dance and who hit first at this point. It doesn't really matter. How do we get to the bottom of what is the reality? And I absolutely welcome and respect and thank you for bringing the contrary thought and fact or experience to the table, because this show isn't meant to be an echo chamber. The show is meant to get to the bottom of whatever's going on. So again, much respect. And it's interesting. It plays into the next point I wanted to raise on what you did say before and what you described before in the history of what has been going on. And we are seeing an interesting shift happening. I think we are seeing a bit of a pendulum swinging. And that's why we live in such seemingly chaotic or even blaringly chaotic times. Because change and shifts and even advancement or growth, whatever that means, doesn't happen when things are at rest. And when things are moving, there's bumps and bruises along the way. And so I certainly think that more people are at least trying to figure out health, whatever that means, whatever combination of whatever philosophies and wherever along whatever spectrum they are. People are at least having these conversations, having these questions, thinking to themselves, trying to figure out what's going on. And from exploration, especially when censorship has so many avenues to fight against, from the combination of those things comes perhaps the closest as possible as we can get as a society to the truth. And so perhaps we will see it in your lifetime, my lifetime. I'm a realist, but I also like to be a bit on the optimistic side as well. So, we live in interesting times. That's what I'll say on that. And so let's go on to another, or maybe your particular area of specialty in working with women and women's hormonal health and women's health overall. And those are inarguably inherently tied. What would you say is the average out of 1 to 10? What would you say is the average level of women's health in modern society, or at least around you that you work with? Are most women kind of particularly healthy? Or are they really struggling? Are there some way in between? What do you think is going on average?
So I feel like for me, where I live on the Gold Coast in Australia. And we are like a very healthy, on average, city. Like people are very active, like everyone's gym membership, yoga training, like all of the things, Pilates. So I feel like what I see might differ from a lot of places around the world, that are the average is just not health at all of what I see around the world. But in my town specifically, I am very blessed to be surrounded by really inspired, healthy lifestyle people. That's just a lot of the people and a lot of the women that I see. But what they're coming to me for is because I would say they're so mixed with a lot of stress. And maybe that is also part of, because of where I lived, there is this expectation to be a certain way and to be healthy and to be the super mom and to do all the things, to have, like, there's a lot of women entrepreneurs around where I live. There's, like I said, a lot of women on stage doing fitness training or Pilates training, like the instructors. And then there's a lot of corporate women as well. And the amount of hats that women wear these days are so many. Like, we are the first sort of generation really to have to juggle entrepreneurship, motherhood, relationships, like being the one person for it all. And so what I see as the most unhealthiest thing in my clients is the level of stress. And that level of stress and anxiety is impacting their body on a physiological level. So it is creating hormonal disruptions, because hormones are just chemical messengers. And our stress hormones will message a signal to our brain, to our ovaries, and it will message a signal to our other hormones. They all need to work together, or else they're just in this big disharmony mess. And that's what I often see stemming from some sort of stress or trauma. That's the women in my area. However, I do see, like, across the board, the health of women, it hasn't been as highlighted or studied as men's health. There's so much still unknown and so much more advancement in study that we need to do when it comes to women's health, because we have such a complex body system and hormonal system as opposed to a male. And so I feel a big health epidemic that women are seeing systemically is that they actually just don't understand how their body functions. If they're going through a natural transition from perimenopause to menopause, they may think, because of, like, society norms, what we've deemed as how you should present, that their symptoms are some sort of disease forming. And really, it's like lifestyle is impacting your transition from perimenopause to menopause. And these symptoms are coming about because of, like, the extra stress and the lifestyle. And the symptoms can be managed, but it's actually not a disease. It's a natural transition for every woman.
Yeah, and there's several interesting points in what you just said, as per usual, right? You live in a society or a city that the norm is high performance,
Mm-hmm.
go, 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 do this, do that for a lot of the women, or that's at least what a lot of the women are doing. So then those that aren't doing it perhaps are feeling the pressure. So even if, yeah, it's kind of like a attack from all angles, because there's women that are running around doing business, doing family, doing this, that, the other. Now that's stressful. Now that's going to have the impact on the hormones. Then there's the women who perhaps aren't doing that. They're living the more slow paced or stress, like less stress, because they're not spreading themselves out so much life. But then perhaps they're feeling stressed because they feel like the norm is doing that other stuff. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
something that's happening a lot of in a lot of different places, as this, you know, societal revolution or change has happened, and women have stepped more into the roles traditionally done by men, being in the workplace, being entrepreneurs, being this, being that, being this. You're right. It is like one big experiment that
Mm-hmm.
it's taking some time to really see how that plays out for anybody. for the women, for the men of those women, and for society at large, for the children of those families. It's we're only now kind of starting to see how it all goes when we kind of invert traditionalism and change around who's doing what in society. It's certainly very interesting. With that said, perhaps there's no perfect answer for how far we've come in these changes, but broadly speaking, of course, understand that there's always exceptions. Do you think it is possible for a woman to have it all in the go get a entrepreneur and then also be a family woman and then also be hormonally healthy? Like, is that even a goal that we should shoot for? Is that something that women are created and designed or built to do? Not that it's a disservice to say perhaps not. Let's just talk biology here. Is it something that from your educated perspective, can we get it all right?
I feel like we're training ourselves to get it all right. But if we're looking at like a traditional biological sense, then no, we're cyclical beings. So we can't be on all the time. Women are very cyclical. We have our menstruation, we have our follicular stage, we have the luteal stage, the ovulation stage, and this all means that our hormones are shifting in our body. Those chemical messengers are changing right throughout the month. And what Ayurveda really teaches us is that the laws of nature has the answer. So if we can align ourselves with the circadian rhythm, which we are not because we are now working all hours of the night, we are looking after children, we're getting up at odd times, we're not aligning with the rhythms of nature, and therefore our body is out of alignment, and therefore it is harder to have it all. But I do honestly believe that if you can really start to learn more about yourself, about your individual constitution, because we all have this unique bioconstitution, mind-body constitution, according to Ayurveda. And if we can learn about that and how that directly will impact our health, then we can start to know the things that we personally can do that is going to be conducive to our health. And so if we say we want kids, we want a career, we want good health, then yeah, you can have that, but you've got to understand you can't have the best of all of that all of the time if you're going to be burning yourself out in your career, if you're not going to be a present mother. Like, you have to find the right sort of balance for you. And when I'm working with my clients, we look at what we call daily routine as like dinacharya, and how can we best do that to complement your health, your lifestyle? Because every woman who walks into my clinic is very different. Some don't have kids, some are young, some are older, some are in menopause, some kids are grown up, some kids are at school, they have a lot of support from their husband, they don't have a husband, like, or a wife. There's just so many different complexities to a woman's life that it really has to be looked at upon from that individualistic level.
Yeah, thank you for giving that very realistic stance and viewpoint on it from the positioning of a women's health coach, because I think it's a disservice when there's all these people out there. Because again, surface level sounds great. You can have it all. You can do this, and it's all going to be great, and it's all going to be perfect, and you're going to be a boss, and you're going to be a mom, and you're going to,
Yeah.
like, and unfortunately, you just got to get real and say, listen, there's things that are going to take sacrifice in other areas. You have a few buckets of your life, or you could have as many buckets as you want, but you only have so much water to pour into each bucket, right? And you can't just necessarily fill all of them or work on them all at the same time. It's just not how life works. It's not how energy works. It's not how, whatever works. And that same thing applies for men or women. But of course, when women are more sensitive to when they have that energy, or when their bodies even require energy to go inwards, then, we have to be realistic in what our goals are. And when we're not, we only set ourselves up for failure, even further compounding the issue. It's an interesting life that we find ourselves in now. But I think part of this pendulum swinging that we're seeing, and part of this kind of figuring it out in this experiment that is bringing women into the workplace, entrepreneurialism, and of course, everything, and I'm not against that inherently, we are seeing women, especially nowadays, start to navigate it in healthy ways. So I was working with a marketing woman, and she has, a marketing firm. She works for herself, and she doesn't try to operate like a man entrepreneur. She operates in honor of her body and her life and her health. So when we would be planning meetings, like she would say, hey, if you really need me, I could be available, on these different days, but I prefer to take my meetings Thursdays and Fridays. I find I'm best able to show up on those days because I'm on this rhythm, whatever, whatever. I understand that. So I was like, all right, cool. And I would only ever schedule meetings with her on those days where it worked best, and so there is an honoring of our natural biology that we can have both as the self and in working together with whomever we're working with. But I think, like you were mentioning, it does come from a comprehension of what that even means to honor our natural biology. And then on the contrary, most people are, one, ignoring, but two, just downright denying what their own biology is. It's certainly an interesting thing to see the ramifications of that. But why is it you think that so many women are perhaps disconnected from what's going on inside of themselves?
I think one is because they've never learnt about it. I don't think the schools really teach this in their curriculum. So I think they just do not know about how their body actually functions on that deeper level, not just that surface level of, oh, this hormone is produced at this time of your cycle and so on, but like really like those deeper layers of self, going back to that Ayurvedic philosophy of the spirituality, that connection to self. Like who are you if you're not just the body? Like, how are you connected to that person? Do you really know your own values, your own ethics? Do you have boundaries? I think a lot of women find it really hard to put boundaries in place. And sometimes the conditioning of society and also the conditioning of how they're brought up, they're brought up to be seen as the good girl. You don't argue, you know your place, seen, not heard, those type of things. And then so when it comes to adulthood, womanhood, and you're trying to juggle all of these facets of your life, but you can't put in boundaries, with yourself, because you don't have enough self-worth or self-respect, but you're also not putting boundaries in either with your boss or your clients, your work hours, your children, your partner. And so that creates this disconnect from self. And so we never really learn who we are until we can start to put in those boundaries, start to take some time in silence, to do some meditation, to do some breath work, to feel into your feelings, to acknowledge how you feel without resentment, and ask yourself those challenging questions, because the quality of the questions you ask yourself will determine the quality of the life that you have and the understanding that you have against for yourself. The other thing is the way that we have perceive the mind in Western medicine or in like our sort of Western world is that the mind is just sort of like this organism, this thinking process, and has these emotions attached to it. But even when we do go back on the history of psychology, the word psyche came from psychology. Even in the Western sense, meant soul, was a Greek term for soul. And so really it was the study of like the soul, but we have really transitioned out of that to make the mind, the study of the mind, be like memory, emotions, mental health, like really sort of pigeonholed it. And so women, they might feel that from the mental perspective that they're just having these emotional outbursts, or they're not really seen. I mean, even if we look back in time of history, women who had bad PMS, premenstrual syndrome, would be seen as crazy and stoned to death or locked up. So there's still this lineage of trauma that we're still trying to navigate our way through with women's health. From an Ayurvedic perspective, we look at our own mental constitution and the layers of the mind. And so we don't just see, as I mentioned, the mind as being memories and emotions and our thought patterns, but we look at the first layer being the buddhi mind, which is the discerning intellect. So this helps us to make wise decisions and discerns between right and wrong, right? It also allows us to have more clarity and discernment in our thoughts and our actions, and leads to more purposeful choices. Now, at any stage, these layers of the mind can be clouded. And just because we had a good row about it earlier, yes, pharmaceuticals will definitely cloud these layers of your mind. So the next layer is the chitta mind, which is the subconscious mind, and it stores our memories, our beliefs, and our past experiences, because that will help shape our future and how we react. Why we can't put those boundaries in place, because of our subconscious mind, our chitta mind, and within that is the samskaras, which are mental impressions that have been left on our mind. When we can start to delve into and understand the chitta mind and work with that, we can uncover limiting beliefs and negative patterns that hold us back. And this process enables us to have more of that mental resilience. And I find a lot of women in the Western culture, we don't have that mental resilience because there's such a blanket way of seeing our health. And then we look at the manas, which is the sensory mind. And this is grabbing all of the sensory information and perception from our external world. So it's the way that we perceive ourselves, or the way we perceive our world. And then it leaves subtle impressions on our mind, how we then react. In Ayurveda, we have techniques to practice what we call pratyahara, which is withdrawing from the external senses and coming inwards to our internal senses. And so this, again, is cultivating that deeper connection to self and that understanding of self, when we can start to understand how our mind functions in that way and practice that pratyahara. And then we have the Vijnana mind, which is that intuitive mind, which in natural health, as you would know, like we really work with that intuition, body intuition, natural healing and health, which I will say in my time in allopathic Western medicine, they do not do. They do not do that well at all. Even a mother has complete intuition over their child, and they now have brought in laws, I know in Australia, where like Ryan's rule and different laws, that if the mother is saying there is something wrong with my child, yet the pathology and everything is saying, no, the child's fine, just come back, you have to now listen to that mother or you will be held accountable, because of this Vijnana mind that a mother has. But everyone has this. I'm just using that as an example. And so how can we connect deeper to that? And then, of course, the final aspect of our mental capacity is the ahamkara, which is the ego mind. And this creates that sense of individual identity and separation from others. And so often it is that ahamkara that maybe is dividing our worlds of Western and Eastern medicine as well. And so how can we move past ahamkara to bring a collective force together to enable healing? The ahamkara helps us recognize our role of ego in shaping our perceptions and behavior. It sort of like helps forms our personality, but it's not all bad. Like we do need the ego, the ahamkara mind, to actually survive in the world that we're in. So I know that was a really long-winded answer, but it's about like that understanding of self is just not there because we're not taught these things and we're not giving ourselves the time to embody these things.
Yeah, it is such a fantastic everything that you just said. And I just want to say, I think the epidemic of lacking mental resilience, I certainly don't think that's gender specific. I think people in general are lacking mental resilience, and the ramifications within men and women, of course, look starkly different in many ways and are very similar in several regards as well. And how we go about developing it, I think, is the biggest difference of them all. But you did kind of answer that next question, and that leads into in your speech just now, in that what does a woman do if they hear something like this, or they find themselves living in a sort of way that they say, wow, you're right. I have no idea who I am as a woman, as a human woman. I don't know what that even means. I don't know what's going on. Like, where does one start to kind of figure out how to honor their body? And I perhaps suppose an answer that you gave already is study Ayurveda or work with a coach that understands Ayurveda, because it inherently, at its core, if someone's presenting it in its, truest form, is going to encompass that kind of information. Is that fair to say, or would you like to expand on that or give alternative options?
Yeah, I think if we're talking specifically about biological women, born women,
Yeah.
then I would say understand your cycle, because your cycle gives you so many keys to your overall health. So your menstrual cycle, really understand that, map that, notice how you're feeling, and then take time every day just to connect to self and to ask, how am I feeling? And then how do I want to feel? So a ritual I do every morning, especially before I get into my office and start work, is I light an incense. I, take some moments to breathe. I then choose an essential oil that is either going to elevate my mood or calm me down, depending on how I'm feeling. And that's because I hand on heart, start to breathe into myself and ask, how am I feeling today? And I'm like, I'm feeling like really flighty, like my vata dosha is like really going. I need to sort of feel more grounded. Then I'll do a practice to keep me grounded. And I'll ask, how do I want to feel? And what does that look like? And if that looks like feeling really peaceful, it's like, not being so animated or connecting to people on social, it's just like being really grounded that day, then I'll like ask myself, how does that look like? And then embody how that looks like. But if I need to step into my confidence, I need to come up like on a podcast, or I need to teach in my course, then I'm going to need more of an elevated mood. I'm going to want to feel more energized. And if I'm feeling lethargic, then I'm going to have to think to myself, how can I change that vibrational energy? Because our emotions are just energy in motion until they become stuck. We have the capacity to change those. We're energetic beings, but you will only be able to change it if you understand what's going on. So just taking time to really ask yourself how you're feeling and notice that, and then ask yourself, how do you want to feel and how can I embody that?
I'm just digesting that. That was a lot. That was good. That was good. Yeah, I think conscious living and conscious comprehension of self at an overall level, but also in a right now level, is super essential, because only through that total comprehension of, hey, at a baseline, okay, this is how I'm doing in life right now. This is how my body inherently operates. Then you could understand, okay, I'm feeling this way today. How can I optimize my current state? Okay, I've been dealt the cards. I've woken up today and I've been dealt these cards of how my body is doing. How can I best play them to get the result that I want, right? And that's really all you can do realistically, right? You can sit and be upset about, I wish I felt better, oh, I wish this was happening, or oh, I wish I was a man, or oh, I wish. Well, that's not the cards you have. Sorry, like this is what you have. How can you play it accordingly? And that applies to everyone in all scenarios. You can be upset all you want that you don't feel the way that you want to feel, or you don't have what you want to have, or you can work with what you got and try to get something better. It's kind of just how the game of life works. And so I absolutely appreciate the mindset of that. It's basically what you just shared. Work with what you can or what you have to optimize, and only through comprehending what you have can you ever think to optimize. And you mentioned another practice that I've seen on your website as well, briefly in one of your responses, in breath work. That's another one of those phrases that's becoming very common. It's becoming very popular, makes for some viral videos, this, that, the other. Can we get to we don't have a ton of time to, I'm sure, get to the bottom of it, but let's talk a bit about breath work. What is breath work versus, just breathing? Everybody's breathing, but what is breath work? What's the difference there?
So from a Vedic perspective, breath work is really about it's breath control. So it's called pranayama, which is breath control, and prana is life force energy. So it's really about using the breath to support our mind and body in the most profound way by invigorating prana, life force energy. With Vedic traditions, breathwork has been used and prescribed to clients for thousands and thousands of years, depending, because we as Ayurvedic practitioners, we work with individual constitutions, their doshas. So a breathwork that might suit you may be different to the breathwork that's going to suit me on that certain day. We have a saying in Ayurveda, like one man's medicine can be another man's poison. So what we prescribe to one person might be detrimental to the health of another because we work from that individual constitutional level. So for instance, if someone has this vata dosha and they've got a lot of air energy, a lot of like anxiety, they've been through trauma and they've never experienced breath work before, and then they go and do a breath where you're doing a lot of hyperventilating, a lot of cooling breath through the mouth, like some of the new age techniques that are out there, that can exacerbate their trauma. That can also push them into a more of a vata exposed state where they're feeling more anxious and they're not feeling supported and grounded. Then if we have more of a kapha dominant dosha come in who are more like lethargic, feeling a bit depressed and down, and they start to do a breath that's even more grounding, it could be too tamasic, which is another Ayurvedic term, like too heavy for them. So what we need to do is more exciting breath, more heating breath. So more of a Kapalabhati breath, which is like a fast sort of moving, because we want to get them engaged. We want more of that fire element. And then someone who is more pitta, who is like, more structured, more hot-headed, more heated, we need to add more cooling and calming breath. So we will do some slow mouth breathing that's going to increase the cooling element, whereas the other breath practices would be all nasal breathing, more nasal breath, more warm, more heating. So Vedic breath work is prescriptive based on the individual's constitution. And if you're going to be doing it in a class setting, it's a grounded breath work that will take you through all of the techniques so that you're supporting each individual dosha, because we have all three. Whereas the breathwork techniques that are becoming very trendy and very masculine in nature, they're all about like hyperventilating and getting this big, powerful, like in and out. And then everyone's like actually blowing off carbon dioxide, but they think they're going through this spiritual awakening, going, oh, I'm so dizzy. Wow, I'm spiritually awakening. But no, just there's chemical exchanges going on in your body to feel that way. And you're actually now in a trauma response. I'm sorry. It wasn't spiritual awakening after all. So yeah, that is another thing I could talk about forever, but it has been, become trendy and not doing in a trauma-informed, supportive way for an individual, which is a real shame because breathwork has the power, honestly, to heal. And for like your clients, like your cancer clients, breathwork can have a profound shift on a cellular level. And that's what cancer is, right? Like cellular retardation of some cells. And so it is so, so powerful in what it can do for us, especially when we're looking at the layers of the mind. To get clarity of all of those layers, you need to bring prana up into the mind. You need to circulate that life force energy. And for women who are having menstrual issues, like apana vayu, which is the downward energy that we need to sort of circulate, there's different techniques that work on your body in different ways.
I'm so glad I asked that. I'm so glad I have opened this can of golden
Worms.
Yeah, because wow, for some reason, I am someone who probably the phrase "there's no one size fits all to health" has come out of my mouth infinite times. I say it all the time. But for some reason, I just never connected the dots of breath work specifically. I've never dove into it specifically. So, maybe I just haven't pondered it. But I think I have tried maybe some of those ones out there. What is it? Box breathing and 4 seconds and I was like, wow, I hate this. I feel awful. It doesn't work. But, to come to learn that perhaps it absolutely just wasn't for me at that time, right? Perhaps that would biologically make me feel awful depending or because of the state that my body was in at that moment, or even overall. Wow, it's just another thing for me to explore. So thank you for opening my mind to that because I mean, yeah, why would it be any different, right? Why would it breathing be any different than anything else in regards to health in that the right prescription or recommendation or the optimal solution, if you will, has everything to do with every bit of you. You know,
Hmm.
it's certainly something that's very interesting. But yeah, breathing, it's crazy. It's so fundamental, yet so taken for granted. It's the
Hmm.
most essential thing, but completely brushed and swept under the rug by probably a good 90% at least of modern society, right? It's like everybody's doing it, nobody's thinking about it. And if you mention, hey, maybe you should think about breathing better, it's only what you do 24/7, 365. Is that
Mm.
something you do more than breathe? Maybe pump,
Yeah.
but I mean, same thing even. It's yeah, it's quite the disservice to oneself, to say the least, when one doesn't at least get a baseline comprehension of what breathing does to our bodies. People don't even think about the fact that it is taking in oxygen and then
Mm.
releasing everything it releases. People aren't thinking about how it's releasing the toxins, the CO2, the fat.
Yeah.
Fat, when you are losing weight, you breathe out weight.
Yeah, I used to say that in my Pilates classes, and it was the only way to get the students to do it properly, breathe properly. As I'm like, guys, if you want to be burning fat, you have to breathe properly while you're doing these exercises,
Yeah.
and then you'll start breathing. You're like, yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's such a crazy thing. How have we got? I don't know if you even have an answer for this, but how have we gotten to a state in society where people don't even ponder their own breath? Why has it become such a lost art, breath
I
work?
think because of what you said, it's an automatic thing that we do day in, day out, and people take it for granted, yet it is our most underutilized tool and it is free and accessible to all of us. If we're not breathing, we're dead, right? So
Uh,
if you know how to control your breath, if you know how to increase prana, life force energy in your body, and how to direct that prana to where it needs to go, you can do that wherever you are. It's completely free. It's a tool that you can do yourself. Yeah, they just they don't know about it. People don't know about it. And I think that's why it's so wonderful that you have podcasts like this that is sharing this side of the world that modern society isn't always being exposed to.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The cracks in the dam that have held back this good information for too long are plentiful, and so I'm just glad to be a part of the change that we're seeing. And it's at a point. Oh, breath work. Can it be done by anyone? Is it actually free and available all the time? Or perhaps are there things in someone's body that would be completely blocking them from engaging in successful breath work? For example, I've had injuries through bodybuilding, sports, this, that, whatever, that kind of compiled and compounded in different ways over time, and that I've worked with a clinical shiatsu specialist to heal and right the imbalances and right the different internal bits that were askew, to keep it plain and simple. But part of what we freed up was actually, the nerve lines here and the muscular structure here and even the ribs here that were blocking my breathing. I was obviously
Mm.
still able to breathe. I'm still alive. But for a long time, I actually couldn't physically get breath to the fullest extent and capacity that my lungs could handle or should have
Mm.
even been getting because there was physical blockage in the rib cage, etc. Now, is
Mm.
that something that you run into in advising people on breath work? Do you think that's common? I can only speak from my experience that I had that going on because when I was getting into holistic health in general, that's obviously you come across it, and I tried different things, explored different things, and like I said, I've tried different things in the past, and it's like, wow, this isn't working.
Mm.
But perhaps it's just because my body physically wasn't able to take advantage of that. Is that something that you've come across ever, or have
Yeah,
thoughts?
absolutely. And that's why there's different techniques for individuals that have different things going on. And like someone who has a deviated septum, for instance, they're going to find it a lot harder to breathe through one side of their nose. And so when we prescribe things like Nadi Shodhana, which is alternate nostril breathing, they're going to feel like that sort of trapping air as they're breathing through one side of their nose. And so perhaps you would try a different sort of breath work, or you might use a nose bridge, which can open sort of the nasal passages up. For yourself, who had like physical restraint through the rib cage, there again is different techniques that you can use to get more breath into the body. And it could be like the Shushumnama pranayama, which is more of that spinal pranayama. So it's opening up through the spine, doing like flexion and extension, opening through the rib cage. The other thing is that a lot of people breathe up here in the chest, whereas we teach like the breath where you're breathing right deep down into the lower lobes of your lungs, and then you're breathing out into the ribs. So you're stretching out through the thoracic part of the back as well, and then breathing up to the collarbone. So you're using the whole capacity of your body. But because of the way that we automatically breathe, most of us aren't breathing in that way. We're breathing a lot more shallow and not using the full function of our lungs to breathe. And so when we do start to try something new, like a breathwork technique, and we also have like a functional thing going on, it can feel really hard and really awkward. Just like we should really be nose breathers, but most of us are mouth breathers, whereas more efficiency comes through breathing in and out of the nose. The nose is humidifying, it's warming, it's a filter. But we're so used to just breathing in and out through our mouth that when you first start to breathe through the nose and close your mouth, it can feel very restricting. But we start to build that resilience to CO2 build up, oxygen, and we start to be more effective and efficient breathers. And again, it's a practice. It's called breathwork practice for a reason, because it's not unnatural, even though it should be natural.
Yeah, yeah. And you may have said it right in there, and I would love to kind of make it very clear, but I understand absolutely that there is no one size fits all, perhaps overall medicinal practice to treat certain things, but on an actionable level, something that all people might be able to, or should at least keep in mind to consider, if there's any actionable kind of overall thing to consider, would it be what you just mentioned, the inhale kind of being focused into the lower area of the lungs, was it? And then the exhale kind of visualizing or kind of feeling or sending that energy up to the clavicle? Because that's an interesting combination. I've heard, like you alluded to, many people say, or even just naturally do, breathe into the chest, puff up your chest, and then out. Or conversely, the other one is breathe into the belly. Breathe into the belly and then puff it out. And then people do different variations or inversements of those two. But you're saying something totally different body parts now. So would you like to expand on that, if you will, or kind of clarify that as is it an actionable everyone should keep in mind?
It is. And the reason we ask to use the full capacity of our lungs is if we breathe into the lower lobes, that's where the actual gas exchange takes place. So that's where the alveoli are, they open up, we have that gas exchange. And so when we can breathe properly and fully, we're having more efficient gas exchange and we're using energy more efficiently. But from a standpoint of where everyone should probably start as a society, I think we're just too wound up. And so I would say everyone, throughout the day, whenever you consciously think of it, you're driving in the car, I would really focus on extending the exhale, because we're always in sympathetic overdrive, right? And what we need to do as a society is come back into parasympathetic more often than not. So breathing in and out through the nose. When you're walking around, just notice, are you breathing in and out through your mouth? Can you try to keep your mouth shut and just walk around breathing in and out of your nose? And then if you're conscious and aware of that, and you've started doing that more often than not, because at the start, it might be a bit difficult if you're used to breathing through your mouth, but if not, then start to say, can I inhale for the count of 4? and exhale for the count of 8 or 6. So the exhale is actually longer. This brings us into more of that parasympathetic state. Vedic philosophy tells us that we're only born with a certain amount of breaths in our whole lifetime. And so we need to use them very wisely. So slow down our breath and breathe really well. And breath, like pranayama, prana, breath is life force for prana. It's that life force energy. So we're working with life force energy when we're breathing properly. We're energizing our cells. We're changing our chemical balance in the body for better when we can efficiently breathe. We're creating resilience, like talking about a resilient mind. There is breathwork techniques that help us to get into a sympathetic mode, get into our sympathetic nervous system, and then control our way back into a parasympathetic nervous system, which is that rest and relaxed state. And that helps us build resilience so that when we do get into those stressful situation and straight away our sympathetic is in overdrive, we can allow our body to be controlled back into a parasympathetic state. It's not foreign for us to do that.
Yeah, and there's so much even to unpack there, as always. I've got into it on the dentistry episode I did, but the reason the kind of nose breathing is not so naturally happening in a lot of people, the underdeveloped jaws and all the reasons for that, and how our airways have shaped and formed. It's not necessarily easy in the modern world to do what we even perhaps should be doing historically because of the way that we genetically have been kind of modified and everything that's going on, kind of bringing toxins into our sinuses. So then it closes them off, all sorts of stuff, but perhaps for another day. For now, I would love to know, for the viewers and listeners who've heard what you've had to say today, where can they find more of you? Because there's so much to explore in working with you. What specific services are you offering, and then where can people find out more about them?
Yeah, so I'm always happy to say hello over on Instagram, which is at Harmony Inspired Ayurveda. So you can feel free to drop in the DMs if you have any questions about the topics that we went through, which was quite a lot. It was a really interesting podcast. So there were so many things we covered. So please, drop me a DM. If you want to get more information about working with me, you can go to my website, harmonyinspiredhealth.com.au. So there is a .au on the end because I'm in Australia. My podcast, Harmony Inspired Health, which you'll find on all sort of podcast platforms. And I do have a free training on my website, or if you want to DM me, I can send you the link. And that is all about how to step into your higher self through my higher self pillars, which is health alchemy. So it's looking at the physical, the mental, the emotional, understanding your individual constitution, and then looking at the empowered mind paradigm, which is going through Ayurvedic psychology, and then dharmic impact, connecting to purpose and to that deeper sense of self. And when you alchemize all three of these pillars, you're more able to step into that higher self, that higher version of yourself. So yes, that is where you can find me hanging out and about.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I certainly recommend someone take advantage of that opportunity, because that's a very generous offer that she just made. Now, to be clear, it is only women that you work with, or is it men as well? Are you just local to Australia? Are you working with people worldwide? What's the parameters?
I specialize in women, but often my women will refer me to all of their male people in their lives. So I do work with men, but my specialty is women's health. And sorry, what was the second part to that question?
If it's just Australians that you're working with,
yeah,
or
sure.
all over?
Yeah, definitely worldwide. So I also run the Ayurveda Alchemist Academy, which through that is my breathwork certification program. And I also run the Ayurveda Alchemist certification, which is certifying you to become an Ayurveda holistic health coach. And that is international, so worldwide.
Wow. Harmony, there's so many fascinating elements to you that I even, in these closing moments, I'm continually finding out. But through all of these interesting messages and philosophies and things that we've covered today, is there a particular message that you'd just really like to leave our listeners and viewers off with?
I think the most important and the most crucial university you can go to is the University of self-discovery, and really understanding yourself on that deeper level. And that means tapping into yourself every single day, because your body will have the answers. The layers of the minds I went through will have the answers, but mostly it'll come through that intuition, that vision on the mind of understanding self. And when you do that, you will be able to heal yourself on so many more levels than you ever thought was possible.
Absolutely beautiful. Harmony, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
A big thank you again to Harmony for coming on the show. She was a great wealth of information on a wide variety of topics that we covered here. So, if you'd like to hear more from her, be sure to check out her podcast, be sure to check out her socials, her website. I'll put links to those things in the description below. She's also given us a bit of a glossary of terms, because there's a lot of Ayurveda related terms that someone might not have caught. So she's given us a few that I'll put in the description as well, if you'd like to brush up on what those were or look into them further. As always, make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. This way you'll get notified whenever I post a new episode. Got plenty more coming your way. Go to ZachTheHealthKing.com, and that'll connect you on the various social media platforms. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, all over the place. But you can find them by going to ZachTheHealthKing.com and click on the links from there. Let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments. What did you agree with, disagree with? All engagement is very helpful. If you found this episode is helpful to you, please do share it with a friend, and perhaps it'll be helpful to them as well. The support really keeps me going and keeps me bringing these episodes to you. You're listening to the Health King's Court. Ancient wisdom, modern health.